Welcome to the Joe Cohen Show. Join me as I share my experience with biohacking and invite top health experts to explore the latest technology, supplements, research, and resources for optimizing your body and brain. Hey everyone, I'm here with Dr. Elena Gross, and she's had a lot of health issues in the past, like chronic fatigue syndrome, migraines, and issues with heavy metals and a whole bunch of different issues that people have, chronic inflammation in general, and she's been able to solve a lot or most of her problems. And in this podcast, I want to discuss what tools she used to do that, what kind of information she learned along the way, what protocol she's using, and what has helped her the most. So let's just get started by, first of all, thanks for coming on.
Joe, always a pleasure to talk to you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Let's get started with first of all, what's your background in terms of credentials or degrees? What were you studying? I know you got a PhD in something.
Yeah, so I started with psychology. I always was very interested in many things, the arts and the sciences, and psychology fell right in between the two. So that's when I started, and I always thought the brain is the sexiest and most interesting organ that is not very explored yet. And halfway through my degree, I got chronic migraine and stopped being very functional at all. And as nobody could give me any answers, I actually switched into neuroscience, was lucky enough to get a stipend and a doctor back at Oxford who took me under his wings. And I did both with my master's project in migraine research, one stem cell research and one in neuroimaging. And when I stumbled across something towards the end of my degree that after lots of trial and error gave me most of my brain back, I wanted to do a PhD on the topic. And in Oxford, they said it's too risky. So this is how I ended up in Switzerland, where I'm living right now. We're in the small uni in Basel, which is in the 3-country corner between Germany, France, and Switzerland. Said I could try this as a side project. And so I have a PhD in the meantime in clinical research from the uni and junior hospital in Basel. And that eventually resulted in a startup, which led eventually to the launch of this product. Maybe we'll get into that in a bit, but this is how I ended up in Basel. So I have a bachelor's in psychology, a master in neuroscience, and a PhD in clinical research. And now I'm more a CEO, CSO, and whatever else is needed in a startup, which can be a lot of different things at the same time. Several hats that I'm wearing in the meantime.
Okay, and tell me about what kind of issues that you had and when did they start?
Yeah, it's a great question. And now thinking back, I think they started pre-birth. So I was my twin died before I was born. I was a fairly sickly child. I was very small. I was pre-born. I already had liver failure kind of at birth. So they wanted to do a blood transfusion on a newborn. And I only was told this more recently. So I think I was never really healthy. Also compared to my peers, I was always having a runny nose. I always had a cold. When I was sick, I was always sick harder, longer. And that went on for most of my childhood. And then I was giving the contraceptive pill at 14 because I was having estrogen lack and my period wasn't regular. So they just thought, why not? I will just give her the pill. And this is, and also again, at the time, I had no idea, but half a year later, I started to get these debilitating headaches, one-sided, excruciating. They thought maybe I have a tumor or whatever. So they were looking for this or psychological issues. And then only later, after about a year of running from doctor to doctor, one person and Dr. Google at the time confirmed this is migraine. And my grandma had it too. And that's when I became sicker and sicker. I was then in the US, was eating a lot of carpet food, not knowing that I wasn't good at detoxing, like McDonald's 3 times a day in a Texas standard high school. Afterwards, I was allergic to everything. I had so many intolerances to all sorts of food items. It was crazy. My gut was crazy. I had migraine. And from then on, actually, these teenage years after my US trip, it only kept getting worse. At the time, I was then applying for my master's degree. My migraine was chronic that time. I was on anti-epileptic drugs. I tried every single drug that was against migraine, everything, even alternative, acupuncture, all sorts of things. It was only getting worse. And then I stumbled across ketosis and metabolism as a role in neurological function, especially migraine and pain. And that changed my life on one side to the better. On the other side, I was now eating a lot of liver, not organic. I was eating a lot of fish. not organic, also the tuna in the world. And while my migraine was really getting much better, my body was decaying and I was getting very fatigued. And now I know probably chronic fatigue syndrome, but also what I eventually figured out, I had lead levels that went through the roof. Possibly I was drinking tap water in Oxford. Possibly my college from 14 something had lead pipes. Still happens in England. We had these old ceramic plates that are red, probably also full of lead. So in the end, I did have heavy metal poisoning for quite some time. I couldn't leave bed for about a year until I developed a better, safer treatment protocol, or like heavy metal chelation protocol, or found one from a US scientist that I could use. And it goes on a bit like this. So then I stopped doing a ketogenic diet. And this is also where my master project and my startup arose. I developed products that have exogenous ketone bodies, safe sources of this alternative energy source for my brain, but so I could still use cleaner food sources. I went more towards the meats and all this stuff, like the whole diet and whatever else I did, we can discuss later. Now I'm working full time again. I can leave bed. I can almost live a normal life, but my ATP levels are still at around a third of what I should have. So my mitochondria are still
Which
damaged.
levels?
ATP, so energy levels inside the cells. And my mitochondria are still quite mutated. Not sure if that can be saved. So I think my biggest issue is still mitochondrial dysfunction, maybe from the past. So my powerhouse is not working well. Maybe from all the insults that the poor guys were experiences, also with my antioxidant genes and my detox genes being mutated. Could be a permanent issue, but maybe can still be fixed. We'll see. So this is where I'm at today. I have left most of the huge problems behind, but I can't do much exercise, like high intensity, especially yet. That would be it. But I'm down to less than one migraine day a month. And I see migraine as a warning. Pain is always a warning signal, even if it's chronic. And I now know if I have too much free iron, for example, I get a migraine. If I drink and not sleep and have stress, especially if I don't sleep, I can still get a migraine. So it's still warning me that it's energy deprived, or that my brain is energy deprived and I need to rest. But it's not there's no constant need for warning anymore.
So you think for you, migraines, the biggest issue was mitochondrial dysfunction? That's what was causing the migraines?
Nominator. Now I'm here to be challenged. Maybe you have a different idea, but this is what I figured out, because my grandma was still, when I never met her properly, only in my young years, I never really inquired about her health. But what my mom says is she was already tired and she had migraine as well. Now my mom is even more tired. She never knows when she was not tired in her life. She doesn't have migraine, but I think she also has this mitochondrial issue. We tested her mitochondria. They're not great either. Mine are even worse. So it seems like there's something that's passed on from the females or the women in our family. My dad's very fit, right? He still does exercise in his 70s and he needs much less sleep. He doesn't get sick. So that this could be maybe a hint that it could be mitochondria, which are predominantly passed on from the mothers. And I think chronic fatigue, migraine, at least from experiments, there seems to be a mitochondrial link to it. Now, it could also be antioxidant genes. It could be, I don't know, maybe you have other ideas. What could be the common denominator? Maybe it's several. That was just my...
Yeah, I think migraines is one of those things that has many different causes to it. Yeah. It's just like most conditions, right?
Yeah.
And one of them could be mitochondria is definitely one of them. Inflammation is going to be another, and that's different kinds of inflammation. So it's like there is some, I think people experience inflammation in different ways. Some people have inflammation more specific to migraines.
Yeah, and I guess if you do have inflammation, your mitochondria will suffer automatically as well. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. Increased oxidative stress.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. So that it could be something like some environmental factors, increased inflammation, and the food sensitivities as well. So if you're having food sensitivities, I'd say that's a big part of inflammation. It could also be related to neurotransmitters, like maybe overexcitability of certain areas of the brain.
Autoimmunity I have as well now, only recently figured out that I have antibodies against certain receptor types.
Yeah, for example, sorry?
I think that feeds into similar pathways, right? Potentially.
Yeah. For example, serotonin, if low serotonin can cause dilation of the blood vessels, worsening pain.
Yeah.
Excess glutamate can cause neuronal excitability, which again, that could excite certain parts of the brain that is related to pain, migraines. And
Mhm.
then, yeah, and dopamine sensitivity could cause sensitivity to light, sound, nausea. So
Exactly.
there's,
But also,
yeah,
if you use up more energy than you have, usually that makes your brain hyperexcitable rather
right.
than this is, for example, something fascinating recently learned is when we die, right? When we see the life or our life flashing by, initially the energy deficit by dying causes increased activity in the brain. And I think it's similar to when you have an energy deficit, first you become hyperexcitable, and that can also trigger epileptic attacks, for example. Because in the outside of the cell, they have a membrane potential, right? The higher the potential, the less likely a neuron is to fire. Now, if this potential, the electrical potential between the inside and the outside of the cell because of energy deficiency gets lower, because this just keeping that electrical potential up requires 50% of brain energy, right? When that becomes lower, it's almost like a dam that comes down and the waves can crash over it easier. And I think that's something that can happen in migraines too. With energy deficiency, the electrical potential goes down and neurons are just much more likely to fire. And when they
Mm.
fire synchrony, you can get an epileptic attack or migraine, which are related, as you probably know. Some forms of epilepsy are very much genetically related with migraine. So it could be similar mechanisms there as well. And then a smaller stimulus, for example, less light, less smell or oral particles in the air can elicit a larger response because those neurons dam has come down.
Yeah, so that's interesting. There's definitely something to be said about the neuronal piece of it, which you're saying is related to mitochondria.
Yes, or to energy availability,
Yeah.
certainly. So these,
Right.
so when you go inside of the brain, the neurons, this electrical charge difference, which is called the membrane potential, that needs to be kept up by shuttling ions. So ions are minerals against their gradient, against the gradient of which they would normally flow. So usually if you have a high concentration of sodium, let's say on the inside, then typically they would flow out. But to keep the potential up, the body or the brain needs to shuttle those ions against the gradient, which
Mm-hmm.
costs tremendous amounts of energy. 50% of the brain's energy is actually the housekeeping. It's just putting up the dam again. When you had a thought saying, so your neurons are firing, you've just been thinking something, then your brain must shuttle the ions that were crossing. The firing is basically the ions traveling. So then the brain must resend the ions across the gradient so that you have the potential up again, so that you have the possibility to think something different. And if that can be done properly, then you can very easily just fire randomly, which is not good. And then you're hyperexcitable. And I think we see some of that also in autism and in other neuropsychiatric issues, let's say, where people do become hypersensitive. And whenever we say you are very sensible or hypersensitive, it could be energy deficiency actually.
Interesting.
Because you
Yes.
need to.
Yeah. So it seems like energy deficiency is a big part of it, plus neurotransmitters. Like
Yeah,
we usually see a
essential.
lot of people are lower in serotonin or high in glutamate.
Yeah, exactly. I think the clearance probably needs energy too, but there may be other things to it, like how many are you producing? How much tryptophan are you ingesting, right? Do you even have the building blocks for enough
Right.
serotonin or dopamine? Dopamine, I think, is tyrosine. I think dopamine is made of tyrosine. So then,
Mm-hmm.
for example, have a vegan diet and you don't get a lot of the amino acids that are essential. Could be an issue, for example, as well. Or
Right.
if you think about the iron gradients again, then it's minerals as well. And especially in the US, what I always thought until a few years back is water, right? As long as it's clean, it's enough, right? But in the US, we see so much filtered water. But filtered water is dead water. You don't have minerals in there anymore. So if you don't have enough of a certain mineral, again, your resting membrane potential, your dam will break down. And then
Right.
thinking, doing, and shutting out filtering will be very hard. That's another thing that I learned in my psychology studies at the beginning was that actually It's you're filtering out constant information all the time. Like 90% of the information that gets into your brain needs to be filtered because it's currently irrelevant. Right now, I don't need to feel what my chair feels like under my bum, right? It's not relevant for our conversation. Now that I'm turning attention, but I can, if I want to, I can feel what it's like, right? So you need to filter out so much information that comes in to be functional in today's world, right? And if you don't have enough energy, the filtering is hard. Filtering takes a lot of energy.
And how does that affect migraines?
Yes, that affects migraines in the sense that when I do get a migraine, everything starts bothering me because I can't filter. It's too loud. I can hardly concentrate. When I have a migraine coming on, for example, it will be difficult to filter out my air filter in the back. There it is, whatever. And still listen to you and concentrating on the next thing I want to say. And maybe there's some other noise going on, or I might smell something. It will be really hard to filter everything out because I'm deficient. And I think some things like hypertension disorder or autism, they may also have a filtering problem. When they say like these children can't focus, they may also have energy deficiency and they can't sort out all the different stimuli that are coming in at the same time. Could be.
Yeah, getting to some of the other causes is like nitric oxide, which causes dilation, or calcitonin gene-related peptide, or substance P.
So CGRP
which are
is a very interesting one, right? Let's say everything we talked about, you said inflammation, nitric oxide, all of these things eventually increase free radicals. This could be nitric oxide, that's nitrogen, reactive nitrogen species, and then there's reactive oxygen species. In the end, these are all like bomb-like molecules. They're very reactive, and whatever they bump into, they will destroy. So inflammation, energy deficiency, every single migraine trigger you can think of, whether this is fasting, whether this is exercise, whether that's alcohol, whether that's perfume, whether that's altitude, or even weather change, can be associated with increases of free radicals. This is the common denominator across, I think, almost anything that can trigger migraine eventually. So this could be the start. Now, what these things do, interestingly, in the body is they will eventually increase CGRP. CGRP does two things that I'm aware of. For one, it hurts. CGRP is a pain-causing peptide, right? So it will, and this is the pain response, which is the physiological correlate of the migraine pain phase, the headache phase. Interestingly, it also is an antioxidant. So it will also neutralize free radicals. So it does two things. In my mind, CGRP, like migraine, is the friend, not the foe. It's warning you, it's turning on the pain. It says, look, this hurts, you need a rest. We need to stop doing stuff until homeostasis in the body has been restored, until the body was able to clear these free radicals, which are very dangerous, and restore energy in the brain or whatever it may be, or clear the inflammation. So CGRP hurts, but it's also the firefighter. It also catches free radicals. So it does two things. And I believe it's elevated until actually the free radicals and the energy situation has been restored. We have adopted energy conserving behavior because all migraineurs that don't have access to triptans or potent painkillers, they will lie down, they will not move. Moving makes it worse. You get very sick, you don't want to eat. You don't want any input. Everything hurts that makes you spend more energy. You just want to lie still in the dark. This is energy conserving behavior right there. I think the CGRP forces you to adopt energy conserving behavior until the situation has been cleared, until the fire has been extinguished.
Okay, what about substance P?
Substance P, similar thing. I don't know. Actually, that's on me. I should have done a bit more research into this alternative pain-causing molecules. So I'm not sure if that's an antioxidant. I would assume it may be, but it definitely is a pain-causing peptide that can also be released during a migraine attack. I really think for those where CGRP monoclonal antibodies are not working, which is these new injection-based drugs that can be used against migraine, where those are not working, it's probably neuropeptides Y or substance P instead of CGRP that are the primary pain-causing molecules in that person or in that patient. So I think it's very similar. It's just similar mechanism, just a different substance. And I would need to
Right.
find it, and I'll do some research whether those are antioxidants as well, if that research even exists. Those are a bit new on the radar, let's say.
Yeah, it's interesting, but they definitely do cause the pain side of things, which is one
Yeah.
of the things.
Which is the annoying part, but it's also the warning.
Right.
It will, if you, the fire alarm is super annoying, right? It's there for a reason. You wouldn't want to turn off your fire alarm as well.
Yeah, so let's see what other things are related to. There's vascular health in general, so how well your vascular system can get into homeostasis, right? If it's vasodilating, or can you, like, if you're having kind of leakage and you don't have good vascular tone, that's another component.
So I think that probably will impact supply, right? So if your vascular system doesn't work well, your brain may be deprived of key nutrients, oxygen, or other things.
Mm-hmm.
So you may also, again, run into an energy crisis or a toxin crisis because it will work both ways. Maybe also your lymphatic system is then like sluggish and you're not getting rid of waste well enough. That could be another thing. Interestingly, like 20, 30 years back, we thought that migraine is primarily a vascular disorder, but that has been a bit defeated, that thought, because the timing of the vasodilation just isn't right. So there is vasodilation, but it's not prior to the attack, right? It happens when it already has started. So that makes me think, or makes not just me, makes experts think that the vasodilation could be a secondary effect. A bit like, okay, I am sensing there's a nutrient deficiency, right? What do? I increase the size of the vessel so that we can transport more stuff where it needs to go, potentially. Or it's a secondary effect of the inflammation that is ongoing. That could be another hypothesis.
And then the question is, what contributes to these kind of mechanisms? So there's genetic factors, of course, which
Yeah.
there's mutations in the ion channels and neurotransmitter regulation genes.
And there's the mitochondria, right? So I think, so in my opinion, a migraine is a mismatch between two things. Now, for one, what we definitely know is that a migrainous brain is using more energy even between attacks. So we have an average 16 to 20% less ATP in a migrainous brain, even between migraine attacks. Now, I don't want to know how much that is even during an attack, right? So you see an energy deficiency, but you also see increased demand. Because in contrast to people without migraine, without these migraine genetics, migraine patients don't habituate. Now, what does that mean? If you don't have migraine, we're looking at a white wall or a checkerboard or some non-changing stimulus. Eventually, your brain would adapt, would stop firing or significantly reduce firing to reduce energy expenditure, right? It makes no sense to constantly encode something that doesn't change. Usually,
And maybe you'll get fatigued in that case.
yes, you do get fatigued if you don't habituate. And that's exactly the thing. So a migrainous brain doesn't habituate, so it spends much more energy, even on stimuli that aren't changing. So we
So
have
they
this,
don't get tired, but then they just get migraines.
they could eventually get migraine. Yeah. And I think
Right.
all of the migraine, that's 1 billion people in the world plus. It's the third most common of all diseases. It's 15% of the world's population. That's not an accident of nature, right? So
Right.
these must have had an evolutionary advantage. Now, if you think back to when we were all part of a tribe lying around a campfire, every seventh person has this hyper excitable brain, this like non-habituating brain. So these are the ones that when the tiger is arriving at night, they will wake up first. They don't habituate. They have constant brain energy that comes at a price. So they need more energy and they need more micronutrients, right? But they may save the tribe. Comes at a cost. Now today, there's no tigers. So sleeping through the night and not waking up easily and not having a brain that is constantly firing and constantly trying to do stuff is probably better for you. But what you will also see is that migraineurs tend to be these perfectionists, right? They will try to do everything 120%, which can also be problematic, right? Can have advantages and disadvantages. But primarily now you have increased energy demand. But if you put a migrainous brain in today's world, you also have a decreased supply. Now, why is that? For one, we are all reliant on glucose as the primary energy source for the brain. Glucose is not very efficient. We can store glucose very well, right? 24 hours max, and then glycogen is is used up, maybe in a migraine patient even more or even less. Then burning glucose produces more oxidative stress, these free radicals, which is already an issue in migraine patients, right? And then we have soils that are deprived of micronutrients. So we don't have the macronutrients, we don't have enough energy as in like fuel source, but we also don't have the small micronutrients like the magnesium, the minerals, the antioxidants that we would need for a high performing, say, fuel needing brain to function well. So I think that's the major issue. It's genetic, yes, but it's also the genes putting in a wrong environment. 10,000 plus years back, these people would rarely get a migraine, right? In today's world, always do. And then you have the toxins, which damage mitochondria, right? You have the toxic in the lights, you have it in the air, you have blue lights, which can increase oxidative stress even via the skin, via the eyes for sure, but also via the skin. So you have free radical inducing stuff everywhere in perfumes and care products. This better than me probably. So we have toxins and we have suboptimal environment for energy function. We don't have ketone bodies around anymore, which are more efficient for energy production, for example. And that was one thing that was really hitting me personally is I have lived what I thought was the super healthy life, which was low fat, low protein, especially low animal protein, right? That's what I was told to do. No sugar, but most of my calories came from some sort of vegetable, fruit, carbs. And I couldn't even switch into ketosis. I had lost all my metabolic flexibility, right? And my brain was relying on glucose and it wasn't enough. And I think it's important. That's one thing. I have developed a 4-pillar model of what is important, I think, to manage migraine properly in today's world. And one of them is introducing an alternative energy source for the brain. But then you also have keeping blood sugar stable. Today's world, it's a roller coaster all the time. It's the micronutrient part, it's the antioxidant part, and then the alternative energy source. Those would be the 4 main pillars from my perspective. That includes many things that fall into these categories.
That makes sense. And then there's things like the food triggers is causing inflammation. So food sensitivities, food triggers.
Yeah,
Stress and sleep deprivation. That's the sleep deprivation is the mitochondria. The stress is where is that coming into? Like just the neuronal excitability, or what is that? Inflammation.
Played almost all of it. Now, stress, interestingly, can come from 3 main sources, right? You can have psychological stress. So this would be what most of us are thinking about stress. This is relationships, this is work stress, this can even be you stress, or always stress, like the positive stuff, like you're excited about an art project or whatever. This can also be stress. Then you have the chemical stress. This can come from your toxins. This can come from food allergens. This can come from water, air, all of this stuff. And then you have physical stress. Physical stress can come from your exercise or overdoing it, right? Interestingly, all of these in the body, they boil down to increasing oxidative stress, all of them. Increase these free radicals, you naturally damage mitochondria unless you have enough antioxidants, which are the bond neutralizers, to catch those free radicals. And if they don't, then you age, or you damage your mitochondria, or you trigger a migraine. This definitely feeds in, interestingly, your inflammation, which comes from the allergens, for example, if you have food intolerances. This will also increase inflammation, and via that, increase free radicals. Will also naturally, eventually, damage mitochondria unless you have very strong antioxidant system, genetically or via food potentially.
Which genes did you find were most relevant for you in terms of the migraines?
I have analyzed all my genes, but then I just get a slight increase here or whatever score. But what has been the most interesting for me to find out was actually my phase 2 liver enzymes and my antioxidant enzymes. And I know that a couple of them are so severely mutated that the actual proteins have bare function or are barely functioning. Some are not functioning at all. And with regards to the SOD2, superoxide dismutase 2, that's one of the strongest antioxidant enzymes that we have. Those are the bomb catchers, which in today's world is essential. Mine is very mutated. Just to put this in perspective, if you have a non-functioning version, you die before birth, right? This is so essential that without it, you don't even live. So advanced mutases, it's bad, right? So this is very interesting for me because now I know I was trying always to do this high intensity interval training because everyone says it's so good, right? If you have mutated antioxidant enzymes, sport, exercise means stress, right? You can't do that. It will always overwhelm you, right? It will do more harm than good. Same with fasting. I was always trying to do prolonged fasts, but fasting again is stress. Like if you're in your hermetic window, what is called hermetic hormesis, right? If you're in a space where you can grow, if it's a bit of stress for you because your metabolism is strong, your enzymes are strong, then it's good. You will grow, right? If you're outside of your hermetic window because it's small, then even fasting can be damaging and can trigger migraine because it will be stressful. Your cortisol will go up. Cortisol is what will keep your blood sugar stable during exercise or during fasting. So, and that's that's definitely one thing I looked at. And then the glutathione S transferases, which are also antioxidant enzymes and are substances that will excrete toxins in a phase 2 of liver detoxification. So there's two main phases. In the first one, the body will make toxins even more toxic to then be able in the phase 2, making them water soluble so you can excrete them. Now, my body is very good in phase 1, so I very quickly make toxins even more toxic, only then to have a sluggish phase 2 to not excrete them properly.
So for people who want to know how to check their genes, just there's in Self Decode, we have a summary report on detox genes. So these are the detox genes are going to have all the genes that we mentioned, or almost all of them. Yeah, pretty much all of them. The other ones, and in general, I would recommend people look at also their polygenic risk score for migraines, because then you're able to see if you have just a very strong genetic predisposition for this. In which case, if you do, you're probably going to need more of a holistic approach because it's probably coming from just a whole bunch of variants and there's a strong genetic connection, and then you're just going to need to like take a bunch of different approaches. Whereas if you don't have a strong genetic approach, if you don't have that polygenic risk score, I think for our polygenic risk score, we're looking at quite a lot of genes, probably like 1 million or something, a million variants.
Tells you it's not a single mutation that is an accident. If it's very low impact variants together determining the disease, it's mostly the environment that is responsible. That's my take on it. Which is
That's true. So we have 110,000 genetic variants that can determine someone has a high genetic risk for it. So if you don't have a high genetic risk, then first of all, it could be either one of two things. Either you're having very rare variants, in which case I would recommend that you do a whole genome test that we are providing very shortly. So that's going to give you like the rare variant analysis, meaning there's common variants and rare variants. And the common variants are going to be like usually, like you said, 15% of the population have migraines. Most of those, probably 95% of those people have migraines just because they have common variants that they got a combination from their parents and grandparents, and then they combined it with some lifestyle factors, and voila, they have migraines. It can help you do some kind of differential diagnosis with your doctor where it's, okay, this is what I would do if I had migraines. I would look at, okay, do I have the genetic risk there in terms of many variants, the polygenic risk based on 110,000 genetic variants? Is it there? Okay. If yes, then it's clearly that I'm probably going to need a more comprehensive approach. It's probably not going to be one thing that I do that's just going to make it go away. Like I take one supplement and it's gone, right? If I don't find it and there is a strong family connection, like you said in your case, you would probably want to do a whole genome test and see if you could find rare variants that could be related to that, right?
And
So you could
rare migraine forms, you probably, if you have one of those rare variant migraines, you probably know about hemiplegic migraines. Those are the very severe ones where you even get numbness of the body, for example, in the aura phase. So your part of your body goes numb. But yes, there are rare ones that may not be part of your test.
But there could also be rare ones that cause common migraines. It's sometimes hard to distinguish because sometimes it's not super clear.
But yeah, that does definitely exist. But still, this is an interesting thing now that I have a startup, and we now launched 8 months ago or so, or seven to 8 months. We launched in the US with the medical food for migraine. So we get to interact with many more patients than I ever had before. And it's interesting that we even have had success with the very rare hemiplegic migraine, which is typically the most ones. So there is hope. This means even for maybe the hemiplegic, very rare variants of migraine, there may be environmental adaptations that make the bad consequences of the genes less pronounced. And
Yeah,
that
absolutely. I know somebody who has that hemiplegic one, and
Mhm.
she was telling me that if she does everything correctly, she can still get rid of them. She's able to not get them, but she has to do a lot of things correctly. And yeah, so and then if you don't have the rare variants, by the way, or the common one, then you might be looking at genetic information, genetic reports that are related to other things. It could be detox, could be methylation, could be something else. Is just you have one thing that's going wrong. Maybe you just had heavy metal sensitivities and you're just not able to detox heavy metals. And that's the main cause of it, right? So that I'd say if you don't have the rare or the common and you still have migraines, you're going to want to look at, okay, what other things could be causing migraines? It could be that you just have food sensitivities and if you're just
there's
having a lot of
something
inflammation.
lacking vitamin D. So migraine is a
Right.
warning sign. So we need to figure out what is it warning about. Oh, you have estrogen deficiency, right? Or
It could
lacking
be hormone related. Exactly.
can be
So
very
it could be
simple.
more focused rather than more broad. So that's why it's important to understand, just in terms of the genetics, like what kind of migraines are we talking about? And then if you do or don't have the risk, it can educate you on the next step, right? Okay, the next step would be looking at different pathways. Do I have a genetic predisposition for bad detoxing or this or bad methylation or lower ability to detox heavy metals or any of these other things that are serotonin, glutamate, or any of the other factors related to migraines? And then if you would tackle that one area, you might just get rid of it.
And I see it a bit like you have to be your own detective. You have to be the detective of your own problems. And what can help, for example, and you may have already been doing this, is write down a migraine diary. Write down, like, what have you done and at least 24 hours prior to the onset of the attack, because this is how long a trigger factor can lie back. If you find that, for example, whenever you skip a meal or whenever you're exercising, you get a migraine 8, 10, whatever, 4 hours after, then you can identify certain triggers that will make certain root causes, let's say, more likely than the others. If your migraine always happens 2 days prior to your period, your menstrual cycle, very likely that's a hormonal issue, right? You might be wanting to look into hormone therapy, maybe with a bioidentical hormone specialist looking into estrogen, progesterone, for example. If you're always getting a migraine when you're not eating, not drinking, too much oxidative stress, exercise, it may be metabolism. And here it's really important to look at some of the ingredients, right, that we put into this artery, right? Methylated B vitamins that could be lacking. Riboflavin has been shown to be powerful in migraine. Magnesium, look at minerals, trace minerals, antioxidants. CoQ10 had a lot of migraine trials behind it. And then very importantly is actually these ketone bodies, which are antioxidants, an alternative, more powerful energy source for the brain. It's called beta hydroxybutyrate. If you're bad with glucose, your brain on a normal Western diet will only have glucose as its energy source. It's not a redundant system, right? So reintroducing
Right.
something else can be lactate, right? If you still can do exercise, but ketone bodies can also be very powerful at giving your brain a more efficient energy source and reducing oxidative stress at the same time. So that's something I would also look into potentially, is adding ketone bodies of some sort or trying the diet if your liver allows it.
Are there clinical trials on ketone bodies or for
Yeah,
migraines?
yeah, we did one actually. That was my PhD project. It's been a while back. I can send you the link. The thing is, it will only work on those migraines that are metabolic in nature. So in the first version of this, we had a 30% responder rate in which it worked very good, 60% reduction on top of a whatever placebo effect was, right, in addition to placebo, but only in 30%. Across everyone, it was not statistically significant in that trial. We did a bigger virtual survey now, and we had 40% responder rate, and it was highly significant across everyone as well. But it will only work in those where we call it metabolic migraine. And that's the sad thing in migraine, where in actually most neuropsychiatric or even civilization diseases, we treat everything as one, right? We say Alzheimer's, Parkinson's,
Right.
MS. But there's metabolic Alzheimer's, there may be toxic Alzheimer's, there may be whatever, right? There's many different.
It depends on the cause, which everybody has a different cause.
Exactly. And when we try to treat everyone the same, it will fail, right? So the same in migraine. It's a large, so I'm assuming around 40, maybe even 50% of patients will fall into the metabolic migraine subcategory, which doesn't yet fully exist. We're starting to cone it. We're optimizing mitochondria and so on. Maybe ketone bodies will help. Then there might be menstrual migraine already exists, right? You have to look at hormones. Then there might be a purely hyperexcitability migraine. You mentioned those ion channels, right? Maybe there's a purely inflammatory migraine. We don't know, but we know that there's a metabolic migraine, and this is where it helps. So not for everyone, but for some. Oh yeah, there you go. Melatonin, strongest antioxidant that we have.
Yeah, I wanted to go through some of I'm on the report here, and it's just listing a bunch of recommendations. I wanted to go through some of the ones that you've tried and what your experience with those were.
So the thing is, I have tried many of them in isolation without success. Now I've tried riboflavin, omega-3, alpha-lipoic acid. The problem there is it's a very strong chelating agent. So if you have heavy metals and you take single dose alpha-lipoic acid, it will make you feel very bad. It will trigger migraine. If you're not toxic.
All right, let's go through one. Let's start with one. I'll list them off, and then you tell me. Okay. And maybe, and then actually, some of them we could just skip through. Okay, so avoid sensory triggers is obvious. Is pretty obvious. Avoid food triggers. We spoke about.
It's trying to get rid of some of
the symptoms. Yeah, avoiding food triggers could be a root cause, but sure.
Yeah, could be a root cause.
The cognitive behavioral therapy, that's going to be to like reduce stress and stuff, right?
Can be a root cause if it's psychological stress. If you had a trauma, if your parents died and that triggers your migraine, then it's a root cause. If you're psychologically good, it's not going to help, right?
Okay. Magnesium
can help if definitely can help if you have reduced magnesium. Yeah. If you don't, it's not going to be a root cause. That doesn't harm to try. So I would always try. There's nothing to lose.
Okay.
And the evidences have. So some studies find a positive effect and some don't, simply because you lump everyone together, right? So they should be looking at what are the people that are magnesium deprived with migraine. If we now add magnesium, is it helping or not? But that's not what people do.
I think there's also genetic variants that I could see here that make a difference between one person or another. Yeah. For example, the NOS3 variant, or there's another gene here that could be interesting. But yeah, you could also check whether you're predisposed towards lower magnesium levels. Let's go to melatonin. That's helping if it's from oxidative stress.
That's one of my all-time favorites, actually. It's helped me so much even with the fatigue. So melatonin is one of the strongest. It's not just the sleeping hormone. It's actually one of the strongest antioxidants that we can get, and it can get inside of the mitochondria, which is where a lot of the oxidative stress is happening. Good evidence in migraine. I take it in crazy high doses, so I don't know if I should disclose that here or not. But
how much?
I would try magnesium, melatonin.
How much do you take of that?
I take about 30 milligrams.
30 milligrams, okay. And you don't find it makes you tired the next day?
No, and that's, I think, because I need it, right? If it makes you tired the next day, you're overdosing. It makes me sleep less. Interesting. I sleep 9 hours without it easily. It makes me sleep less because I probably have so much oxidative stress going on through the night still, and so much trouble detoxing, that it's used differently to sleeping, just as a sleeping hormone. I think it's, for me, primarily used as a chelating agent, for example, against heavy metals.
Okay.
So levels without talking to a doctor, right? I'm not a medical
Right.
doctor. I'm just changing my own experiments and my own knowledge, right? And N of one. So please talk to your doctor. A typical dose would be more the 3 to 5 milligram range. Are you taking melatonin?
I do, yeah. 3 milligrams
Mhm.
a day. Two, 3.
2 to 3 milligrams. Yeah, that's more the reasonable dose if you're fit and healthy for sure.
Yeah, 2 to 3 milligrams. I would say probably like 2. It depends if I'm traveling. If I'm traveling, I take more, a little
Yeah,
bit.
makes sense.
But what about TENS or nerve stimulation?
Yeah, nerve stimulation has some evidence behind it. I think it is calming the nerves that are overactive potentially. It doesn't seem to have much downsides. I don't think anybody got cured by it either.
Have you
It's
tried it?
I have only tried it at conferences, like
Mm,
learning that, not long term or anything.
okay.
So I can't really be the judge of this. I hear some people use it. It doesn't have side effects or anything. All the people I know still have migraine while using it. It's more a symptom. It's more symptomatic tool, but it's a
Mhm.
tool without side effects. So I don't have anything against it. Let's say.
Okay, the acupuncture I assume is working through reducing stress and nervous
That was
system
interesting for
over.
me. I always, when my parents spent a fortune on acupuncture because people said it, they swore by it. We went to a specialist back in Frankfurt at the time, and I used to only have right-sided migraines. And when
Mhm.
I did my acupuncture after I did that, I sometimes also got them on the left side. So it's really doing something, but they were still there.
Okay, so it
Maybe,
didn't help you, but maybe yours wasn't primarily from stress. That's why.
yeah, exactly. Could be for
Right.
sure. A
So
regular sleep
regular
schedule.
sleep schedule.
100%. That's important for everything. It's important for stress. It's important for metabolism. It's important for hormone control. Important for so many things. And interestingly, my deep sleep is so low. I'm still trying to figure this out. But when you don't go to bed at a similar time, your deep sleep window will not move, apparently, right? So if you're
Right.
usually going to bed at 10, deep sleep in the first couple of hours in the night, you go to sleep at 12, it's not like you can then catch up everything because all your body's on a clock, like really tightly controlled clocks. And that's important, especially also for migraine. So I know that sucks and I'm struggling with it too. But typically, not just getting the similar amount of hours, but also getting sleep in a similar window of the day. I don't think it matters
Right.
whether it's 12 to 10 or, I don't know, 12 to 8, right? If you're an owl or whether it's 9 to 5 as long as it's a similar time frame.
Have you tried biofeedback?
I have literally zero success for me, but again, it was not my root cause.
It could be
Um,
related to stress.
yeah, it could be if you're very tense or whatever, and you can get that under control.
Yeah. What about, and then COQ10, I assume that's if it's related to mitochondria or
Then
oxidative
it's
stress.
mitochondria, antioxidant. I now use that now. All of these, like magnesium, CoQ10, they are starting to work with me in combination. So this is also
Mhm.
why in this Mitochondrial brain ritual, we put everything together. But for some, it may help in isolation as well. So there's good evidence for it and no side effects. Really worth trying.
And by the way, the reason in your case why you might need many things together is because it seems like you have a very strong genetic component, and that usually means that there's probably multiple mechanisms by which it's
Multiple
occurring.
plus it's all very damaged already, right? And if you
Right.
have fixed energy metabolism, yeah, and you have a broken system, you have demand, increased demand for many of these things, right? So it's not unless you get it all from your diet, right? It's not like you will only have one deficiency usually, right? You usually have more than one. So that's the thing. Unless you test it, it might be beneficial to start taking more than one of these or adding them at least in sequence and see if the effect is adding up. Maintaining
Right.
a regular schedule 100%.
So this is
Even
part of the
among
circadian rhythm type of situation.
exactly that. Plus, you will not be able to, at least I'm not so able to access my fat stores as well. If I don't regularly, I run into hypoglycemia or low energy more quickly. So that's another reason why this is
Okay.
very good in my brain.
Okay. Alpha lipoic acid is probably related to detox and
Yeah. That's good.
antioxidant.
we really need to say a word of caution here. If you are toxic and you're taking high doses of alpha lipoic acid, it's a fat soluble chelator. It will go into your brain and it will basically drop a toxin 30 times a second. It can do a lot of damage if you take that super high dose, one single dose, if you have heavy metals accumulated. So that's something to be careful about. If you feel, I would start with a small dose and see how you feel, right? If you feel off, drop it. Or take a really low dose only.
So I see in 3 placebo-controlled trials of 178 migraine sufferers, it reduced the number of migraines by half.
Yeah.
But again, that is, again, I think your case is very specific where you have migraines and
And
you're also sensitive to heavy metals, and the heavy metals, and then you also have probably a lot of heavy metals, and then that kind of stirs some things around, and then maybe you get an even worse reaction. But I've seen that in people, but I don't think it's the most common. I
no,
don't
it's
think
probably
that
not
most
more
people
common, but I think it's also becoming more common.
could be.
The world becomes more toxic, sadly. So
Yeah,
it's
could be.
just if you feel odd, then this could be a reason. I would always
Right.
say with all of these things, listen to your body, right? If something feels very off, chances are there's something off, and not
Correct.
everyone is similar, right? So just because that was positive in a randomized controlled trial across several people doesn't mean that there were people in there where it wasn't good for them. It was an average, so we don't know.
So the keto diet we discussed, that's going to be related to the mitochondria. Tryptophan is going to be related to serotonin, low serotonin. Hyperbaric oxygen is going to be related to mitochondria and probably other things as well.
And that's an interesting one, which I never really understood, is because it should be increasing oxidative stress in the short term. So is it then the antioxidant response that makes this anti-inflammatory afterward?
Could be the type of oxidative stress in particular.
Maybe.
And
Yeah.
I also think that it improves mitochondrial function, hyperbaric. So maybe there is some
compensate or in general? If we can compensate or in general, because hyperbaric oxygen increases reactive oxygen species while we're in there, right? It's high pressure, high oxygen.
I think in general it helps mitochondrial function, even though it can temporarily increase oxidative stress. You could argue the same thing about exercise. That also increases oxidative stress.
Yeah, exactly. So then in migraine, sometimes if it's too much, the exercise is bad. If it's like low intensity,
Yeah, if you're doing too much hyperbaric, I assume that is also not good. It's that hyperbaric is one of those things where it's dose dependent.
yeah. So that's maybe another word of caution. And figure out how your window is, whether you can tolerate how much you can tolerate, what's the therapeutic dose, and what's overshooting when you consider this treatment.
What I see here is that the oxygen, it helps it reach the brain, increases the amount in the brain, which can decrease inflammation, alleviate migraine pain, aid in vascular constriction, potentially reducing the frequency and severity of migraine attacks. But also it says that it was a Cochrane review of 11 trials that it terminates acute migraines, interesting enough. So there's something about
saturation, because altitude can increase migraine, and you would assume there's low oxygen.
That's right.
So maybe about the increase in oxygen.
In general, I think if you have more oxygen, your mitochondria works better. That's why people are more awake.
When you have more oxygen, you produce more oxidative stress because your mitochondria will work more.
Correct. That's right. So that's why they put more oxygen in casinos, because to keep people awake. And then, yeah, maybe you're increasing some oxidative stress, but it could help more acutely by just increasing the energy levels.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I just want to say that if you feel bad on a keto diet and you have had medication overuse for decades, right, as it was a bit in my case, then also just listen to this, right? Don't force yourself. Also, ketogenic diet is mimicking fasting. It can be stressful if your liver can't easily make the amount of ketone bodies or the glucose that you need, right? There's good evidence, but doesn't always have to be for you.
Okay, so those are some of the. Is there anything that we covered that we didn't cover that you think helps a lot?
No, I think one could add a few more substances, but the clinical trial evidence is lacking. Now, what I would say, if, for example, you have vitamin D, for example, deficiency, I would add vitamin D. There's even trials behind it. Vitamin D is one. Now, also some of those trace minerals.
Okay, one second. I put in to take off clinical trials. It included a couple more, like SAMe
Yeah, SAMe is a
and vitamin D.
methylation helper. Oh, and then vitamin D. That's good. Yes. So vitamin D, SAMe is a methylating factor. You can also take methylated B vitamins. I would probably add those. And it doesn't have the ketone bodies. It has a diet, but several are struggling with a diet. So maybe ketone bodies. Maybe that's too early to recommend, but we see quite some success with that as well. Beta hydroxycontrate, for example.
Have you seen success with SAMe or no?
I took it also when I was really bad. Just adding this without the other stuff didn't help.
Okay.
Right now, I'm taking a lot of stuff that can methylate. For me, it wasn't successful on its own. But if, for example, you're purely deprived of methyl groups, that would be the thing to take. Now,
Do you find that some people that low methylation can contribute to migraines or not really?
I know too little. I don't think this is ever tested, to be honest. Very few people have the data, sadly. That I wouldn't know. But just to be on the safe side, we put everything in methylated form so that you have some excess methyl groups, because those are important as well, right? Just to be on the safe side.
64% of the differences in people's chance of developing migraines is due to genetics, which is quite a lot. 16% of Americans regularly have migraines.
60% have migraines.
1/6, no, 1/6.
1/6, yeah, 60. Yeah, exactly. That's a lot of people. But then if you think about this being an evolutionary advantage 10,000 years back, and they're all put in the wrong environment, it's definitely genetic, but not all genes have to express if you put it in the right environment. If you change your environment, and your environment includes your friends, your family, what you eat, what you drink, what you ingest, what you work on, your lifestyle, the light that shines, whether you have blue blocker glasses or not, right? What you put on your skin, all of this is environmental factors, the supplements you take or you don't take, and you can turn your environment around. So these genes are not all the time negatively expressing. I'm 100% sure migraine is an issue that can be fixed to a large extent if you find your root causes. Are you checking mitochondrial DNA?
There's some variants that are correlated with that, but yeah, basically it's, yeah.
That's not often tested. And that's one thing that's so interesting, that is mitochondria passed on from your mother, and migraine is typically passed on from the mother. So from the female side of the family, which could be a link to that mitochondrial DNA may play a role. And also in these GWAS, these genome-wide association studies, they had one in gene enrichment analysis where they found that it's been below significance, I think, in the general GWAS, but they found that many genes that would come up in that analysis would have a link to mitochondrial function, even if it was
Interesting.
nuclear DNA, certain enzymes. So that's interesting. That I think mitochondrial dysfunction is going to be the number one factor in civilization diseases. It's a growing epidemic because there's more and more toxins introduced into the world every day. And it's something that isn't really screened for. So that's a whole thing that still needs exploration, is how are mitochondria doing? Now, in Germany, we have this bioenergetic health index, it's called, where you can see how your mitochondria are mutated, how much ATP output you have, what the proton leak is, how much reserve capacity you have. Mine looks pretty shocking, but it's basically mirroring my how I'm healing. And I think we'll find that a lot of issues, especially neuropsychiatric issues, will have problems with mitochondria and maybe passed down through the mother. CFS, or chronic fatigue syndrome, I think also strong mitochondrial link. So eventually, I'm not sure where the technology is, but it maybe eventually at gene decode, you can add the mitochondrial genes. It's not that many.
At self decode, it could be with the, I think there's some of them. I think maybe for the whole genome, unless it's just a different kind of test. I think there's some of them. There's definitely some of them, but I don't know if it's something that you have to sequence on its own.
Yeah, I've only ever done nuclear genome testing. I've had my whole genome sequenced, but only nuclear. I don't think anybody so far has ever cared about separately sequencing the mitochondrial DNA, which is this round DNA, which is not in the nucleus, it's in the cell, in the inside of the cell, swimming around unprotected, which is also why it gets mutated so much. So I think a lot of mitochondrial damage will also be acquired in your lifespan just because it doesn't have the protection of the nucleus and it doesn't have enzyme repair. Now, a lot of stuff that is happening inside of the mitochondria is actually controlled by nuclear DNA, but not all of it. So it has its own entire genome.
What was the test called that you got in Europe that measured mitochondrial function?
A bioenergetic health index. Can send you a link if you're curious.
I got a different one that also. Oh yeah, that's the one I got.
All right, cool. How was yours? Probably pretty good.
I got it actually before. I got it in. Let's see, this is 3 years ago.
Yeah, that's one next
Let me
time.
see something. What was the result here? It actually wasn't so good, and I think the reason because I was missing a few nutrients that I actually started taking.
Yeah.
I took them. It was funny because I was taking them. I started taking them like right after I took the test independently because I felt like my mitochondria could be better, and I started to like take some things related to that. If I look at this list now, yeah, like when they, so I just started taking a bunch of stuff that they ended up recommending anyway, and I was like,
Interesting. That's cool.
yeah, I also was taking it based on other lab tests. It was a bunch of things that came together. And then I got these results back. I'm like, okay, so it didn't really help me too much. But for example, niacin, I was just deficient on. And then right after I started taking niacin, I felt okay.
It's so healthy, right? So who would have thought? But that's
Yeah, who would have thought? And then, and that's something that I started taking like 3 years ago around. And after I started taking it, I noticed a very big difference. That was one of the things that really helped fix my food sensitivities as well. So is there anything else you would like to add or talk about that we didn't cover?
Not really. The only thing is, if you suspect that you may be part of the metabolic migraine category, then look into some of the ingredients, really methylated bioactive ingredients, especially ketone bodies, but look at a bunch of the list, look at what Joe has put together on the website on all the micronutrients and a few outside of that you can take that may not have side effects and may help you get started on the recovery path. And then you can trust in your body, listen to your body. You will have some capacity to heal yourself as well once you get the resources. And migraine is, I believe, migraine is to a large extent manageable, if not even preventable to a large degree, if you change your environment so it matches your genetics and you find out what is warning you about.
Yeah, and that's where I think a genetic test is also valuable. Like, for example, my results showed that I do have more likely for food allergies and certain other things. And I did have food allergies, right? But the idea is that you could see if you also have more, huh?
What are you eating now? Can you eat everything you want again?
Pretty much, yeah.
Cool.
I don't, I've been reducing the food sensitivities over a period of 7 years already. And it was like a gradual thing because I just kept on figuring out more and more stuff. And then I would say there's been big changes over the past 3 years where I've just the precision health stuff really helped me figure out more things, lab testing, genetics, and then just more research as well. And then I've been able to have huge changes. And so I would say that my food sensitivity situation now is the only thing that I might be sensitive to is some grains, but I'm not even sure, to be honest, because even if I react to it a little bit, it seems like I just overcome it very quickly. The only thing that I started eating large quantities of that I just didn't eat before was dairy. I just eat huge quantities of cheese
I
and
stopped dairy from those car acceptance, but I do feel better with optics still, with all the raw milk cheese and all that, and I love
yeah, I'd say
on there again.
absolutely. Yeah, so I would say that butter, cheese, all this stuff I skipped for a while, and then
And histamine is still an issue. I didn't know, but I have a lot of histamine in my gut, so now I'm trying to reduce histamine, please. my handmade kombucha and all my sauerkraut and all that I'm not eating right now. But hopefully only again for a period until everything has been resolved. So yeah, testing is a huge asset. Testing genetics and figuring out, really don't underestimate how much listening to your body and relearning to listen to your body can help you as well. It's something I've been ignoring for years. Really feeling and then checking what does it do for you if you do a certain thing. If you skip something, could take something. Yeah, be your own detective.
Yeah, and I think, so I would agree. Just it makes a very big difference what kind of lab test you get. So that's where testing, what kind of migraines you have, and that's where testing comes in, right? So you want to, and I talk about this sometimes. I think the quality of the genetic testing is huge. You see a lot of crap companies out there doing genetic testing, and it makes a big difference which kind of genetic tests you get. And because if you're getting bad information, it's worthless, I think.
That can even do more harm than good, right?
Correct. You're just going to be led in the wrong directions.
Something that's not right.
Yeah. That was the reason I started Self Decode, is because I saw there was just a lot of bad genetic stuff out there. Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Where can people find you?
I'm Dr. Elena Gross, Dr. Elena Gross on all social medias, and for the product, it's Brain Ritual or Mitochondrial also on all social media. I have a website where it's a free white paper. You can also find it on Brain Ritual, where it's about how to master migraine. A lot of things we have discussed a little bit more. People can download. I made a YouTube course, 15 minutes video segments on metabolism, on migraine and metabolism, or the full pillars of what to do, like snippets you can watch free as well if you want to learn more on what you can potentially do and how to get started.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. Have a wonderful day.
You too. 67% of listeners aren't subscribed to the show, so please don't forget to show your support by hitting the subscribe button now. You'll not only be supporting the show, but also investing in yourself and your health journey, all while helping keep us ad-free.